Have you ever walked away from a relationship and felt like you had just survived a nightmare? There was no violence, no threats, but something had drained you bit by bit until you could no longer recognize yourself. You didn't know why you always felt guilty, why every time you were hurt, they were still the one being comforted, why you slowly drifted away from friends, lost faith in yourself, and were left with a relationship that looked like love, but made you feel more suffocated than ever before. If any of that sounds familiar, you may have already faced, or are now facing, a psychological manipulator, a kind of psychopath who doesn't need violence to destroy you. They only need one thing: for you not to notice. In this video, I'll walk you through 7 of the most subtle signs a manipulator uses to invade your life and your mind. Each sign is broken down through the lens of both modern psychology and timeless Stoic philosophy, helping you not only recognize the danger, but learn how to rise from within. If you've ever doubted yourself, if you've ever loved someone, and the more you loved, the more you disappeared, then this is the video for you. Stay with me until the end, because this time, you may not just be watching, you may finally begin to wake up. And if you've ever met someone who made you think, "Finally, I've been seen," then chapter 1 is meant for you. 1. They seduce you too perfectly and make you believe you've found your soulmate. Have you ever met someone who made you feel like, finally, you were being seen? Not in the casual, polite way, but in a strange, uncanny resonance. As if that person showed up at exactly the moment you needed them most. They didn't just understand you, it felt like they had been waiting for you. The conversations ran deep. They somehow knew exactly what you were thinking. Their compliments, not flashy but piercing right through that fragile space in your heart, the place even your closest ones had never truly touched. Everything felt too perfect, too fast, too right. And that's exactly when you should begin to be cautious. During World War I, there was a woman who once enchanted all of Paris, a dancer, a symbol, performing before the most powerful men in Europe, Mata Hari. She didn't just possess a seductive beauty, she had a gift for making anyone feel special. Military officers, politicians, diplomats, they all believed they were the only one she truly cared for. But what made Mata Hari one of the most notorious spies in history wasn't military strategy, it was calculated empathy. She studied her targets before approaching, knew what they needed to hear, what they believed in, where they were most likely to open up. And from there, she turned their longing for connection into a blade, one they handed her themselves, only to be wounded without knowing why. You see, the most dangerous people don't always arrive with a gun at their side. They come with a song you used to love, a compliment timed just right when you were feeling small, a presence that feels so safe you let your guard down without even noticing. In psychology, this is known as the mirror effect, when someone mimics your emotions, interests, and values as a shortcut to build rapid connection. But when it all aligns too smoothly, too quickly, it's no longer natural resonance. It's a scripted performance, a stage built just for you, not to love you, but to consume you. The Stoics warned of this. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Be wary of admiration that arrives too quickly." Don't be too quick to believe in those unexpected, affectionate looks, because sometimes the thing that makes you feel seen is the mirror most carefully polished to reflect the very longing you carry, not who they truly are. And that's where the problem lies. You don't love them. You love the image they've crafted. An image designed to invite your trust, win your heart, and then take what you never imagined you'd give away. I once found myself in a situation like that. She entered my life like a breeze across the desert. She knew exactly what I was tired of, what I was striving toward, and even what I couldn't put into words. We talked through the night as if we'd known each other for years. I thought, this must be destiny. But just a few weeks later, when my guard had lowered, a few sensitive things I'd shared with her in confidence were suddenly used in a game I didn't know I was part of. I thought I was falling in love. Turns out, I was being harvested. That perfect beginning wasn't love, it was a trap. And every trap is set by someone who knows exactly what you're searching for and is willing to become that very thing to make you open your heart. Stoicism doesn't teach you to distrust everything, but it does ask you to be mindful when things unfold too quickly, too seamlessly, too much like the dream you've always wished for. Because real life isn't that smooth, and someone who truly cares doesn't need to be perfect. They arrive slowly, with awkwardness, with unplanned surprises. Not like a mirror reflecting every desire inside you, but as a real person with uncopyable edges. So learn to watch out for those who sweep you off your feet too quickly. Keep a quiet space inside, not to doubt, but to let your intuition speak. Because sometimes the person who makes you feel the most loved is the one preparing to take the most from you. Not your money, but your peace, your closest connections, or the sacred corners of yourself you once believed were untouchable. And before you offer your trust or your soul, ask yourself gently, could it be that you're falling for someone who's read you like a report and simply stepped into the dream you've been waiting for? 2. They make you feel guilty, even when you've done nothing wrong. Have you ever apologized, even when you knew deep down you weren't wrong? Not because you're irresponsible, not because you can't tell right from wrong, but because you've grown so used to feeling like the cause. The reason someone went silent, the reason they got upset, the reason the relationship turned cold, tense, and exhausting. So you apologized, just to patch up something that in truth didn't begin with you. I once found myself in a relationship like that, quiet, subtle, and over time, it eroded the very way I saw myself. She came into my life like a gentle light. At first, everything felt soft, comforting. I was heard, I was shared with, I was cherished. But just a few months in, I began to notice something strange. Whenever something went wrong, I somehow always ended up carrying the blame. There was a weekend we'd planned to spend together. I let her know early that I had to attend an unexpected work trip, and instead of complaining, she simply replied, "It's okay, I'm used to it." No anger, no irritation, but a quiet blade in those words. I called back to explain, even sent photos to prove I was really away on business. She just repeated, "I know, I'm not upset. It's just, I'm not as important as your work." I fell silent, and then I apologized, even though I had done nothing wrong. At some point, I began adjusting everything, just to avoid the feeling that I was hurting her. I changed my work schedule, reduced contact with friends, even began to doubt my own personal decisions. Because if she wasn't happy, surely I must have done something wrong. She never blamed me directly, but every soft reaction, every quiet withdrawal, every tear at just the right moment planted the idea in me that I was the one making everything worse. It's a kind of manipulation you can't quite name, a form of control built on guilt, and when it goes on long enough, you lose the ability to tell the difference, what's a real mistake and what's a feeling you've been led into carrying. A manipulator doesn't need to scream at you. They just need to plant one question in your mind. Maybe I'm just not good enough, and that's why they're hurting. And from there, they slowly take hold of your guilt, like a rope gently coiling around your neck, just soft enough that you don't want to escape, but tight enough that you can no longer breathe by your own rhythm. Epictetus once wrote, "No man is free who is not master of himself." No one is truly free if they can't command themselves, and nothing takes away your command faster than carrying a guilt that doesn't belong to you. I realized this one night, standing in the middle of a tense conversation, once again apologizing for something I didn't cause. She said something I'll never forget. "I know you're a good man, but you don't know how to love anyone but yourself." I stood there, frozen, and suddenly I saw myself, not the man who once lived by strong principles, who knew who he was, but someone constantly second-guessing himself, just to hold on to a connection that wasn't built on respect. I stepped back, not in anger, but to listen again, to my own intuition, and there I saw it. I had been living inside a map of guilt, where every path led to the same conclusion. I was the problem. But you know what? Not every tear is real. Not every "I'm fine" is harmless. And not everyone who makes you feel guilty is telling the truth. You have the right to verify. The right to ask again, was I really wrong? And if the answer is no, then you also have the right to walk away without carrying the weight of a meaningless apology. Because sometimes an apology isn't a sign of kindness. It's a sign that you've let someone else define the truth for you for far too long. So, if you find yourself saying sorry again when you're not at fault, stop. Step back, not to rebel, but to reclaim the authority over your own heart. And the last time you apologized, was it truly because you were wrong? 3. They mimic your emotions, pretend to empathize, but never truly connect. Some people always listen to you, always respond at just the right time with soft, understanding words. They seem to understand your sadness more deeply than even those closest to you, but somehow you still feel alone, as if you're crying by yourself while they just sit there, playing out a role they've memorized. I once had a friend like that. When my mother passed away after a long illness, I didn't tell many people, but I told her. She didn't shed a tear, but she held my hand and said just enough to bring me to tears, "Your mum must be so proud of you. I wish there was something I could do." And I believed it, believed that someone was truly present with me in the darkest moment of grief, until 3 months later, I declined to help her with something I didn't feel comfortable doing, and suddenly she turned cold. During an argument, she brought up the night I broke down, using it like a bargaining chip. "I was there when your mum died, and now you can't do one small thing for me." My heart sank, not because of the words, but because I realized she had never grieved with me. She simply stored that pain to use it later. Emotions, for people like that, are not a form of connection. They are a strategy, a tool, a disguise rehearsed from countless performances in their lives. In psychology, there's a term for this: cognitive empathy. The ability to recognize and simulate someone's feelings without ever actually feeling them. It's like a mirror. It reflects your eyes, your smile, your tears. But when you reach toward it, there's nothing there. No warmth, no real human presence. Just an image, finely adjusted to make you open up and give more than you realize. You share a painful memory. They tilt their head, they nod slowly. They say things that make you feel understood, but their eyes are vacant, their presence cold, and you wonder, am I just being too sensitive? Am I asking for too much? But no, that's not real emotion. It's a copy, a script they've used with others and will use again. Seneca once wrote, "Words must not outpace the heart." Words should not outrun the heart. If empathy comes too quickly, too perfectly, without a single flicker in the eyes, a tremor in the voice, or a pause in the silence that follows, then perhaps it's not empathy, it's imitation. And you begin to see it if you leave just enough stillness in your mind to observe. It's that tiny delay in their gaze after you've cried, as if they're waiting for the perfect cue to respond with a programmed expression. It's a gentle phrase that sounds kind, but doesn't match the weight of your pain. It's the strange smoothness with which they always know exactly what to say, when to touch your hand, when to go quiet. And yet, after all that, you still feel empty, because they were never truly there. They didn't hurt with you. They didn't walk through your losses. They stood on the far bank of your feelings, like someone reading a map of a land they've never stepped foot in. And they reenact every step, every sigh, every gesture you long to see, not because they care, but because they know. False empathy, if crafted well enough, can unlock the deepest doors inside you. The problem is, when someone mirrors the exact emotion you need, at the very moment you feel weak, you can mistake that reflection for truth. You don't question their rhythm, because you're too grateful someone is walking with you. But if you pause long enough, you'll see they never stray from that perfect rhythm, not because they feel deeply, but because there's nothing real to stumble over, nothing authentic to break through, just a script. And once you've handed over your pain, your secrets, the darkest corners of who you are, to someone who only memorized them like data, you'll feel twice as alone, not just from the loneliness, but from realizing you thought you were loved, only to discover what you received was an empty gaze, studying your life like a script. Stoicism doesn't teach us to be cynical, but it reminds us that wisdom isn't in the feelings that get stirred, but in the ability to step back, observe, and ask, does this feeling come from a heart or from a mind trained to perform? So, if you've ever found yourself crying in a room and the person across from you looks at you with the calmness of someone watching a scene from a movie, then maybe they really are watching a performance. And you've become the lead in a tragedy they have no intention of saving you from. Before you believe you've found a kindred spirit, slow down and ask yourself, could you be mistaking a clever mirror for a heart that truly knows how to feel? 4. They weaponize your secrets and weaknesses, always at the right moment. Some of the sharpest wounds don't come from enemies. They come from the person who once sat beside you on seemingly peaceful afternoons, the one who listened to things you never told anyone, the one who gently nodded as you spoke of scars that don't show on your skin. What hurts most, sometimes, isn't the pain itself, but realizing that you handed the weapon to the one who used it, through trust, through memories, through fragments you once believed would be held with care. Early 20th century America holds a story that became legendone of betrayal with no visible shape. Truman Capote, the literary genius known for his refined yet piercing prose, shared a celebrated friendship with Babe Paley, a symbol of grace and the wife of CBS's chairman. Their bond ran deeper than lavish gatherings, reaching into the quiet loneliness behind the velvet curtain of high society. She believed he was the only one who truly listened, and he did listen, to every crack in her voice, every whisper buried in exhaustion, until the day he wrote. An unfinished novel excerpt was published in a magazine. The names were changed, but the details unveiled the most intimate corners of Babe Paley's life. Things only one person could have known. No warning, no apology, no explanation. She wasn't angry about being written. She was devastated because she didn't know when he stopped remembering as a friend and started remembering as a tactic. After that article, Babe Paley went silent. She severed all contact. When she passed away, Capote wasn't invited to her funeral. The community turned away, and the man who once captured the hearts of the elite never finished that novel. A friendship a reputation, a part of his legacy, all lost to a betrayal disguised as literature. And that's how dangerous people work. They don't need sharp blades. They only need you to speak, to trust. And then they remember every word, every emotion, every opening. Not to heal, but to store away. Like someone quietly stockpiling weapons in the dark, waiting for the perfect time to strike when your defenses are down. They don't attack when you're strong. They wait, patient and calm, until even a single sentence is enough to break you. In psychological manipulation, this is a well-known tactic. Information hoarding. They don't argue. They record. They don't hurt you immediately. They wait. They hold off until you're confused, exhausted, or weakened. And then they bring up what you once confided, as if reopening a door you thought had been closed for good. They'll say, "Didn't you once tell me that?" And with that single sentence, your entire sense of safety collapses. You start questioning yourself, wondering if you were too open, if you were wrong to trust. But the truth is, you weren't wrong for trusting. You just didn't pause long enough to see that the person across from you was using empathy like a finely sharpened blade, not to protect you, but to shield themselves, or worse, to hurt you exactly when it benefits them most. Epictetus once said, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgment about them." The problem isn't just that a secret was exposed, but the betrayal behind it, the cold, calculated clarity with which someone turns what once wounded you into a weapon, not by accident, but with preparation. We don't have to live in hiding, but we must relearn something modern life has made us forget: the art of keeping the sacred parts of ourselves. Not everyone who smiles and asks how you're doing is safe enough to tell. Not everyone who makes you feel understood truly loves you. Some people listen not to stand beside you, but to know exactly when you'll fall. And if you've ever felt cut by your own story, that's not your fault. That's your warning. From now on, be careful with those who often revisit the past, especially the things you said when your heart was at its most tender. Someone who truly loves you will protect those memories as if they were their own soul. A manipulator will keep them stored for the moment you slip. Stoicism doesn't tell you to stay silent forever, but it teaches the wisdom of choosing what to say, to whom, and when, and what to keep for yourself alone. Something silent, sacred, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. Because not every truth needs to be laid out on the table. Some truths should be kept like a quiet flame, small, but warm and safe. Ask yourself, slowly and with stillness, who is holding your broken pieces, and what will they do with them? If you've ever given that sacred part to the wrong person, leave a single dot in the comments, just to remind yourself, from now on, I will protect what deserves to be kept. 5. They don't get angry, they control. And that is the scariest part. Have you ever met someone who never shouted, never broke things, never raised their voice, and yet just being in their presence made it hard to breathe? A single glance, a silence that stretches too long, a turned back at the moment you needed them most. No yelling, no noise. But somehow you knew you'd done something wrong, and you'd do anything to make it right, even if deep down you had no idea what the mistake was. Andrew was a young designer, talented, passionate, full of drive. He met Julian, a respected mentor in the field, admired by everyone. Julian didn't talk much, never offered empty praise, but whenever Andrew shared his ideas, he watched Julian's reactions closely. A slight nod, a brief comment, or, most unsettling of all, total silence. Gradually, Andrew started adjusting everything to fit Julian's taste. He stopped sending drafts without first censoring them in his mind. He lost his confidence any time a project didn't get Julian's nod. And one day, when a major client offered him the chance to develop his own brand, Andrew declined, because Julian's gaze that day wasn't approving, even though he said nothing at all. That wasn't guidance, that was control, and Andrew didn't realize he had become a quiet replica of someone else. The most dangerous kind of control doesn't come through shouting, it comes through stillness, but a kind that makes you shrink inside, a glance that makes you censor your words, a silence that makes you retrace your steps, even when no one has questioned you. In psychology, this is a subtle form of emotional manipulation, control through withdrawal. The manipulator doesn't threaten, they disconnect. And because you fear losing that presence, you begin to change yourself, to please, to twist into a shape they'll find most acceptable. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "A man's worth is measured by the things he lets go." 1. But how can you let go if you don't even know you're being bound? How can you walk away when the only punishment is a cold stare, a long silence, and the quiet absence of someone who once made you feel accepted? A manipulator doesn't need violence. All they need is selective affection, like taming a wild animal, rewarding it when it obeys, going silent when it resists. And you, slowly, learn to be more tame, more quiet, more small, just to keep that love from vanishing. But have you ever stopped to ask, is what you're clinging to really love? If you find yourself changing the way you dress, the way you speak, the way you think, just to avoid a certain look, then maybe you're no longer living your own life. To break free from this kind of manipulation, the first step is to rebuild your own emotional space. A space where you don't need permission to be yourself, where your value isn't dependent on someone's approval or their silence. No one has the right to make you live as if you're walking on eggshells. No one is worth you turning yourself into a more pleasing version just to avoid conflict. In the end, the question isn't whether they get angry, but whether you still hold the right to feel. Ask yourself, quietly and honestly, are you living by your inner compass, or are you being steered by someone else's pressure in the air around you? 6. They destroy every other relationship you have, just to keep you alone. One day, you look around and realize you have no one left. No one listens when you try to talk. No one stands by you when you need to feel understood. Relationships that once felt like blood quietly become strained, distant, cracked. Not because of any big argument, but because of tiny needles, pressed in the right place, at the right moment. A vague comment, a questioning glance, a retold story with intent. You didn't lose your friends to time or distance. You lost them because someone slowly pushed each one out of orbit around you. Cleopatra, the legendary seductress of Western history, didn't just win Mark Antony's heart with beauty or power. She dismantled his alliances, pulled him away from Rome, separated him from friends, advisors, even his own family. It was a breathtaking love, but one that stood alone. 2 people, and a dependence as sweet as it was dangerous. History doesn't just tell the love story of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. It tells of the isolation their bond created, like a sunlit island with no path home. In the modern world, this is no longer about emperors or queens. It could be a partner who always makes you feel uneasy before seeing your closest friends. A seemingly innocent remark. I feel like they don't really respect you. A frown when you reply to an old message. A half smile when you share a happy story about someone at work. They never directly stop you, but with each moment like that, you step back, cut a tie, adjust yourself, just to keep the peace. And one day you find yourself living in a city full of people, but feeling like you're in a desert, because outside of them, there's no one left. This is a familiar tactic in psychological manipulation, triangulation, divide to control. They don't attack you. They go after the people who once stood beside you. They plant suspicion, sow tension, construct stories that only you hear. You begin to ask yourself, does my best friend really dislike my partner? Are my co-workers secretly jealous? Is my mom being too controlling? One question after another, one doubt after the next, until you've built an invisible wall, separating you from the very places you once called home. And in the end, there's only one place left to lean on: them. Like a spider spinning its web through the house you once called your own, they slowly pull the threads that connect you to the world and replace them with a network of their own making. Subtle, tight, but not meant to hold you, meant to trap you. In that relationship, you become a quieter version of yourself, because every word might be twisted. A lonelier version, because now everyone seems to have a flaw. A more fragile version, because you only have them to ask for guidance. Seneca once said, "Associate with those who will make a better man of you." But a manipulator doesn't want you to grow stronger. They want you to be better, only when you're with them. They make you believe, outside of them, no one is sincere. They isolate you not with walls, but with the doubts they train you to carry toward everyone else. If you're watching your circle grow smaller, if you're exhausted from defending a relationship that once felt as natural as breathing, if you're changing, not because you're growing, but because you're adapting to someone else, then stop and ask, who is pulling you away from the people who once gave you strength? A healthy relationship doesn't make you lose the ones who loved you before. It helps you keep them more fully and more peacefully than before. You don't need many people, just a few, but ones untouched by anyone's voice but their own. They are your safe circle, and it's up to you to protect it. No one has the right to redraw that circle, except you. Which relationship in your life was worn down not by time, but by someone's hand? If you've ever lost someone because of a person in between, leave a single dot in the comments, so we can relearn how to protect what's worth keeping. 7. You lose yourself, but still try to hold on to them. When did you stop recognizing the face in the mirror? Not your physical face, but the wild glint once in your eyes, that shy, sincere smile, the way your voice used to tremble with excitement when speaking of things that lit you up inside. When did all of that begin to fade, to vanish, as if someone had patiently, silently blown out the candles in you, one by one? You didn't realize you were changing, not all at once, but in tiny, quiet ways. You began adjusting the way you spoke, shifting your habits, avoiding a story you used to love because they didn't like hearing it. Then you stopped wearing a certain color, saw fewer friends, stopped mentioning a dream that once made your eyes shine, all just to make someone else more comfortable. And slowly, you started living each day inside a carefully edited version of yourself, not for an audience, but for one person only. That was no longer you. But you didn't dare stop, because if you stopped, they might leave. And you had given up too much to risk losing them now. I once knew someone like that. A quiet girl, gentle, always soft-spoken. Everyone thought she was lucky to have a partner who was successful, calm, and thoughtful. But I had known her before, and I remembered well. She used to be bold, playful, unafraid to dream or speak her truth. Years later, when we met again, all I saw was a faint outline. She smiled more, but her eyes didn't. She told me he had never forbidden anything, only suggested, that it was she who chose to adjust herself. No one told her to change, but she changed, bit by bit. And now, after so many years, she no longer knows who she really is. That's how true manipulators operate, not with shouting or commands, but by making you choose to abandon pieces of yourself. Not with whips, but with glances that make you fear disappointing them. With a cold withdrawal whenever you do something outside their taste. They don't pull strings, you cut your own, just to keep them pleased. In psychology, this is called identity assimilation. When you stay too long with someone who manipulates, you begin dissolving into the mold they prefer. Not a puppet being controlled, but a person actively self-editing to fit. It may sound strong, but in truth, it's the beginning of becoming lost. Seneca once reminded us, associate with those who will make a better man of you. Who we become depends deeply on who we stay beside. If a relationship makes you shrink a little more each day, forces you to shelve your essence just to remain, then that's no longer love. That is intentional fading. And tragically, the one fading is you. You're not wrong for wanting to preserve a relationship, but stop if preserving it means destroying yourself. Look at the suitcase of memories you're carrying. How much of it is truly yours, and how much has been packed, labeled, or even discarded by someone else? If you find yourself growing distant from who you once were, come back. Pick up something you used to love. Call an old friend. Listen to a song that once moved you. Write a journal entry, not to be perfect, but to be real. Then look into the mirror, slowly, gently, without judgment, and ask yourself one question: was it really worth it to hold on to someone if it meant letting go of yourself? You've just walked with me through 7 signs, ruthless yet silent, of a relationship that isn't normal, isn't random, and certainly isn't harmless. From perfectly timed compliments, fake empathy, and wounds carved from your own memories, to the quiet glances that made you go silent, and that moment when you looked in the mirror and didn't recognize yourself anymore. This video isn't just here to help you name the manipulator. It's here to help you call yourself back. In a world where control wears the face of love, where manipulation speaks in gentle tones, Stoicism teaches us one thing: simple but demanding courage. Return to your inner core and rise from the place where you left yourself behind. Stoicism doesn't ask you to retaliate. It doesn't train you to defend through suspicion. It teaches you to rebuild your inner compass so that no matter what kind of relationship you wander into, you'll always know where your center is. You cannot change them, but you can stop letting them rewrite the story of your life. So ask yourself deeply, are you living as the person you used to be, or merely existing as the version they created? If this video touched you in any way, don't hesitate to leave a single dot in the comments, so I know you're still there, still holding on to the truest part of yourself. And if you want to keep walking this path with me, a journey of healing, awakening, and standing strong amid what you cannot control, hit like, share this video, and subscribe to the channel, because the world is never short of manipulators, but the one who knows how to keep themselves whole is the one no one can ever destroy.